Good afternoon. It's Russ Kahn. I'm the product manager for 2020 Insight. Thanks for joining us. In the next hour or so, we're going to cover some of the key new features in Insight version 9. I'll jump right in. Most of this will be PowerPoint. I will show some of the software here to put a name with a face. But Insight version 9 in general contains over 200 enhancements in addition to cumulative bug fixes from previous versions. Focus in general across the board was for version 9, in addition to some new features and new modules, was to really focus on improved performance, improving user experience, making the software easier to use, especially in areas such as master data maintenance and mass changes, improved administration features, strengthening and then adding flexibility to our bill of material configuration capability, and also adding some easier setup options for process groups if you've got straightforward requirements there, reducing the need to define complex process group filters with some sort of global settings and things like that. There are 3 new modules that will be in the price list. The warehouse management system is by far the most significant change. It's a new add-on module. It represents the largest development project for this version. We add pCon Configurator integration. This is primarily targeted to our European customers. I'll get into that a bit more later, as well as a shop floor assistant frame to support tracking of actual labor time per routing operation. The top 5 new features, as I said, warehouse management. There's a expansion of our catalog markets functionality to support what we call the sales channel solution. I'll explain that. The integration of pCon, the actual labor, and then that 5th position could have been held by probably 30 or 40 other enhancements that are similar in magnitude, but the conditional override for MCF settings, sort of won the tie, or so to speak. So there's lots of smaller enhancements that could have fallen into that last, but can't have a top 5 without 5. So the MCF setting thing won the day. So let's on warehouse management first. The goals of this module were really to provide a built-in warehouse and extended inventory control solution to support either more complex material handling requirements, particularly with regard to finished goods, but also supporting raw materials. It's designed to provide traceability to inventory movement in complex warehouse scenarios or warehousing scenarios, and improve reliability and efficiency of material handling as well. So the way that we've approached that is by adding this new module. The overall concept is that primarily affects 2 areas. One is the ability to provide more detailed definition of warehouses and locations with specific behaviors and functions in mind. So for example, common storage methods such as rack-oriented warehousing or block storage, where I've got a space on the floor that's designated, I may be stacking items in width and depth, or other sort of common storage methods, and supporting picking and put away rules and business logic around those storage methods. In addition to just sort of focusing on those methods and the supporting master data, we provide the ability for what we call an inventory move order concept, which is supported with a status workbench that's designed to support automated business rule execution to help guide operators for picking and put away and inventory movement operations in the factory, or either in a warehouse, in a distribution center, or in the plant. And what's specific to how we move materials around, things like moving materials from plant to plant, moving materials from warehouse to warehouse, et cetera. The expected benefits from this module are to improve on-time shipments, reduce labor costs by simplifying, minimizing, travel time, for example, reducing inventory because of reduction in waste and errors, and improved inventory accuracy, improving space utilization, and so on. In other words, the better you are at managing those materials, the more efficient, and therefore the less costly that process will be. So the areas of impact that are targeted are things like raw material inventory, finished goods, and if you have them, one or more distribution centers. The target sort of user base for this feature, again, it is an add-on, is someone who has one or more of the following conditions: either a very high production volume, maybe more than one location with material moving back and forth between them, multiple warehouses or distribution centers, maybe a complex material flow across multiple warehouses or multiple locations. Maybe if your focus is make to stock, where with a high volume of inventory, and you're assemble to order or ship to order, or if you've got a very large volume of make to order, or a hybrid of those scenarios. So something sort of more or less along the lines of something like this, where I've got maybe a central material warehouse from a supply plant who's supplying multiple manufacturing locations who have their own internal warehouses. One or more of those factories might feed a distribution center. And within the distribution center, there may be order fulfillment activities happening, like a pick-to-order type thing, versus pure distribution, like cross-docking. So, the ability to set up business logic in the system that helps identify these items, organize them for movement, and ensure that the movement occurs, validate the movement, and control the movement of those materials. Just an example, when we talk about sort of storage methods, an example of rack storage is, an inventory rack, but within that rack, we may have rules for how that space gets utilized. So, for example, on this last column of the rack, we can support behaviors such as subdividing a location into what we call zones. The dark blue squares represent what we call a warehouse container. That could be a pallet, it could be a bin, a bucket, or just simply an individual item. But if it's something like a pallet that can hold multiple of these light blue items, which are the actual products that are being stored, I can create rules and relationships between, for example, what specific locations can you support this kind of large warehouse container versus a small one, and how many zones within that warehouse location a given container consumes, so that when I put something away, I know how much space is left and what kind of containers can fit in the available space. Beyond that, with the inventory move orders and the workflows, then now we can support custom business logic that if I create a move order and process it, the system can go figure out for the operator where they should put that next container. Based on the type of container it is, what space is available, how many zones it needs, if there are continuous zones open or not, and maybe other business logic such as we only put certain types of products in certain types of locations. So that's an example with this rack storage type concept. We can also support dimension-based space consumption. So instead of using zones, I can just give the location a width dimension, for example, and the container a width dimension, and then the system will figure out a % consumption of the open available space. And again, custom action can be developed to figure out, can I fit this container in the remaining space of a given location. We can also use those rules for picking rules, for example, to say if I'm picking, I need to pick, inventory to a shipment, then what items do I pick, where are they located, what sequence do I pick them, and so on. excuse me. There's master data that are supported, warehouse types, location profiles, and so on, that provide all of the supporting infrastructure for these features. Warehouse types, again, define what kind of storage is being, method is being used for a given warehouse. You can define a control method that are right now just a category. They're not enforced in any existing business logic, but they're there for future use. And then location profiles that defines sort of build relationships around what kind of location is it, what kind of warehouse containers can I put in there. So in the warehouses form, it's similar to before and is backward compatible, so it's the same form for developing warehouses. If you don't have the new module, then you only will be able to choose the manual warehouse type. But depending on the type I choose, I can define different location numbering schemes. So there's a template numbering scheme depending on the warehouse type. But in addition to that, I can control whether that location is active for use, for example. So if I'm moving a rack because I'm expanding my space or rearranging the factory, I can turn off allow entry for all the locations in that rack for a period of time, but continue to allow removal so that the system will automatically consume material from there, but will not suggest that anything be put into that location because entry is turned off because I want to clean that rack out so I can reconfigure it. Or I can simply have an in-use on-off flag that says this location is not in use right now for a given reason. You can also use custom barcodes. So if you're employing this in a new area and you've already got a barcode scheme for how locations are numbered, for example, you can provide either if you can't for some reason match our location code to your legacy code, you can still give a new location number but reference your existing barcode value and not have to relabel the racks, for example. And then the inventory move order scanning function will recognize those what we call the external barcode. It's a cross-reference and find the correct location. There are map updates for changing things like allow entry, location profile, and other values for multiple locations at one time. And those location profiles control storage method, allowed container types, and then how the space is consumed with up to 3 different methods. So I define any number of location profiles that I need and link those to a specific location. I also, within the profile, can control what container types are allowed in any location that has that profile. In the context of that relationship, so if I have this fixed zone 5 location profile, then for each type of container that's allowed in that profile, I can say, okay, how many, in this case, zones are consumed by that type of container. And if it's quantity-based, then I put quantity. If it's zone-based, I put a quantity in here. And if it's dimensional, the system you will reference which dimension matches the consumption dimension of the profile. Okay, so again, warehouse container types, they're user-defined, so you can have any kind that you want, even just logical container types that maybe aren't maybe physical in nature. They do have, you can assign physical parameters, so you do need to provide dimensional information, if only for reference. You can provide reference information such as a weight limit that can be evaluated in custom actions to put away, for example, and also a max stack height that says, can I stack these containers on top of each other? And again, we also support external barcodes for containers. So for some reason, you've got some specific way of doing things. And containers can be created on the fly or up front manually. So if it's a license plate type situation where I'm reusing containers, then I can predefine container names or container entries. Or I can have an action that creates a container as part of the process. So for example, if I scan something off the assembly line into a pallet, then I can have a scan-based action that creates a new container definition for that one-time use pallet, and then that container can go away later on. So again, on the container type then, there's also a relationship between items and their container types. So I can restrict items to only being allowed on certain types of containers. So if I've got a conference table that doesn't fit on a certain type pallet, then the system doesn't allow them to work together. There is also mass change capability, so there's maintain item warehouse container type action on the items form that allows you to assign container types en masse to groups of items. So if you filter by item family and assign a couple different container types to everything in that item family, you can do that all at once. So that's all the supporting data that's designed to support the business logic of inventory move orders. So the inventory move orders, again, is a transactional entity that is part of the warehouse management module. So it has a status workbench-based workflow. It's customizable, so you can define your own workflows, and it's supported with user forms and shop floor frames to manage the execution of those inventory orders. It's a typical status workbench. And there is, first of all, an inventory move order form, so you can create move orders manually if you need to. But you can also use custom actions to create them, and again, based on different activities that are going on. You may automatically create move orders anytime something comes out of assembly and is ready to go, into the warehouse. Or if you create an internal shipment to the distribution center, then maybe there's a move order that's created on the receiving end that predefines where those received items need to get put away. So the move order types currently supported are a movement, so it's like a transfer, a put away, which is like taking something from production, putting it into inventory, or a pick, which is taking something out of inventory and delivering it, for example, to a shipment. You can predefine in the individual transaction the from and the to locations, also a transfer location. So if you want to define a location in a warehouse that represents a forklift, for example, you have the option to pre-assign what forklift or what other material handling device, for example, is the quote transfer method or transfer location. So I can say take it from location A via location B and deliver it to location C. We can also pick, for picking, we can pick either to a location or to a shipment. So if I want to create a pick list for a shipment, I can do that by creating a bunch of individual move orders and then putting them into a batch. So for example, I could create a batch if I have 3 operators picking items for a shipment, I could create 3 batches and pre-assign those, 4 given operators, which the operator code name is also part of the order data, so I can pre-assign that or not, and essentially create a pick list for a shipment and divide it up across a few different operators. On the shop floor, there's a move order execution shop floor frame. And what it allows me to do is either scan a warehouse container. So if I'm taking items off the assembly lines that are being put on to barcoded warehouse containers, and I'm just, the system's automatically creating the put away order, I just go up to the next item in the sort of the offloading area of the assembly. I don't need to know the order number. I can just scan the next warehouse container ID, and if there is a move order out there, this frame will bring that up, and it'll give the operator, okay, take it from assembly offload, output location to this specific warehouse rack. Now again, the logic behind this calculating the to location is through custom actions that use the inventory move order architecture to create the data, and the logic behind how to decide what that to should be is custom for now. There will be standard methods defined in the future, but because of the variability of how different people, make those decisions, there's still likely to be custom versions of it, no matter how many good ideas we come up with. So I can also toggle if to a work list type view. So there's an F2 button on this frame that allows me just to see all the move orders that are out there. If I want to group and sort by operator, by employee ID, for example, or just tell people take the next one available, that's just fine. And the type, classification, all of from and to is here. I can select a row, click submit, and that'll take me actually back to the execution function for that particular move order. And I either confirm that I put it in the to location that I was told to, or I can override by a scan the to location and complete the transaction that way. Okay. So let me just briefly jump into Insight here. So one of the easiest ways to sort of see the, sort of how these locations in this system are defined is if I take a look at the plants inquiry, there is a warehouse overview in the plants inquiry form, and that lets me see all of my warehouses, and within the warehouses all the locations. So here's a block warehouse. Here is I believe that's I think Carrie has a rack warehouse. And then within a given location, if there's content in there, if I click, I can actually see what items are in there. And if I'm filtering, it'll show any items available or items assigned to that location, whether they have any value, current on hand or not. And if there are warehouse containers in a given location, I can see that individual warehouse container, as well as what items are actually in that container. And so this system supports inventory like make to stock or purchase to stock inventory items, as well as manufacturing order items. So the item that may be in there may be an order item, that's like a finished good make to order, a work order, or it could be just an inventory component that I make to stock. It depends, so it's flexible to use for either type. So one other feature that's in here is I can see sort of a summary of do we allow entry and removal, what's the current sort of active state of that location. An entry gate, exit gate is a sort of a special designation that says this is a location that's used to place things in order to then put them away into a rack. So I might have a conveyor sitting next to a rack, and I put new stuff that needs to be put away, gets put on that conveyor, which is the entry gate, and then somebody else gets it in a move order to take it from the gate to the correct location, for example. It's just an optional designation for a location. And then if I have zone-based definition for that location, then I can see if they're empty, it means they are available zones. If there's a check mark, it means the zone is consumed. And then in this case, I'm drilled down to the warehouse container that's in that, so I can see which container is consuming which zones. For quantity or dimension, I've got a separate capacity column here that depends on the location method. So it's dimension. I have 96. I believe this is defined in, I'm not sure what unit of measure, if it's in inches, millimeters, meters, I'm not sure. And I believe if it's quantity based, then you'll see the quantity available. So that kind of gives you an idea of sort of the different ways you can define these different locations and then how they get used by the system. So I do have a question that popped up on this. I'll just go ahead and tackle it now. So it's how do mobile scan frames interact with inventory move orders? They really don't. If you use the move order system, then you need to use the move order scan frame. It is designed to be mobile friendly. Let me get back to my PowerPoint and I'll show you the screen there. It's quicker. So, I mean, it is sort of oriented with this upper left small frame design so that hopefully, so that it can be used on a mobile device. But if you want to handle move orders, you have to handle them with that, with that frame. Inventory transactions are generated automatically when a move order gets executed. That doesn't have to be customized. If I complete a move order, we will take the from and the to location data and create an appropriate inventory transfer transaction for everything contained within the container that's being moved. All right, so next we have the sales channels function. The goal here is to really help manufacturers who have kind of a multi-brand, multi-channel sales model. This is primarily around, or the use case we're trying to look for is really around a retail type business where I've got maybe different products grouped into brands, and then I sell those brands through different sales channels. And I may sell different brands or have different customers that have access to different channels. And so essentially all we really did is allow customers to link to more than one market and buying groups to link to more than one market, so that hopefully that if you have this particular situation, you can have actually, it reduces the number of sort of catalog versions you need to maintain. You don't have to duplicate data and wait as much in order to achieve that type of control for the customer, and allows you to better sort of fulfill this kind of scenario where I've got maybe brand A, brand B. A brand represents a market channel, a sales channel. A series represents a catalog version, and then that series contains multiple products, or product versions. And product versions might get mixed and matched within different series. And then those series or / catalogs make up a brand. So I can link more than one brand to more than one customer or buying group, depending on how your model is set up. So it really is simply additional flexibility in the customer to market relationship. I can now assign multiple markets to a given customer. I can define a default market for that customer, and I can, on a sales order, I can override the market. So it will, on a new sales order for this customer, the default market will be chosen, but I can change the market code before I start entering items, and then that will restrict the access of that order to the catalogs related to that market. In addition to that, I can exclude certain catalogs from certain markets in this specific context. So on this customer, in their market access, there's a customer-specific exclusion. So in other words, customer A has access to 3 different sales channels, but within sales channel B, they don't have access to a particular catalog version for whatever reason, for contractual reasons or whatever. So I can sort of open things up to a customer, but then provide individual restrictions at the catalog version level if I need to. Okay, next is this pCon Configurator. The main reason I'm including it for our North American customers in this review is that it may or may not be relevant to you, probably isn't, but it's potentially an idea starter. You may have other situations that are similar to this that you may say, hey, I could use that if you can link to some other application. So I just wanted to show it because I think it's an interesting approach to a specific problem. So pCon Configurator, if you're not familiar with that name, is a point-of-sale type product from a competitor of ours in Europe called Eastern Graphics. It's kind of like if you're in the office industry, it's kind of like our worksheet product. If you're in kitchen, it's somewhat similar to design. And we have lots of manufacturers, particularly in the office industry. That's really where their main business is for Eastern Graphics, where they resell some of their products from other manufacturers. So as an office furniture manufacturer, I make my own case goods, but I sell chairs from somebody else. And maybe they're rebranded or maybe they're not. I just sell so-and-so's brand of chairs also. And so when I sell those, I just buy them from the other manufacturer and either have them drop shipped or delivered to me or whatever. So most of the manufacturers in that industry in Europe have catalogs available in pCon, just like our customers in the U.S. would have catalogs in CAP or Giza. And so these manufacturers who resell from other manufacturers would like to just sort of reuse that data and not have to maintain those third-party products in their own Insight catalog so that they can put them on Insight sales orders. So what we've done is created a link to the pCon product software so that I can define a product version in Insight in a line type that says, hey, this is a kind of just a placeholder product. I'm really going to grab something from this pCon configurator and use it in the order line. So what we've done is an integration to pCon within the Insight order entry in your interactive mode. So as I'm entering a line item, I can select a line type that's linked to this pCon configurator. It will launch pCon, allow me to select an item, configure it, and then it will import that item to that order line in real time. And primarily what that does for these buyout type items, it eliminates the need for these manufacturers to set up data, all those other catalogs again in their own Insight catalog data. So kind of how that looks is there's a new sales configurator option in line types definition. I need to set up at least one product version, which is kind of the placeholder product within the sales order. When I add that item to a sales order, we launch pCon. It has to be installed on the same machine as Insight with an appropriate license. So you're on your own in terms of acquiring the pCon install. And any catalogs that are installed for pCon then can be accessed. I can select an item in pCon. I can configure it. When I'm done, I click Apply. That takes me back into Insight. The product version is still, behind the scenes, is still that placeholder product version, but the order line description is imported from the pCon data. I can actually still apply my own features and options. So, for example, if I sell a chair either assembled or ready or RTA, then I could maybe have an assembled option and add an upcharge. So pricing is imported from pCon, but then I can still merge my own price rules on top of that. So maybe pCon gives me the MSRP price, I apply my dealer discount, and then I add my assembly upcharge, so I can really kind of merge the two functions. The detailed data for that product in the pCon configurator is stored in a combination of order line attributes and order line notes. So the article number or the product code from pCon is stored in Insight as an attribute, and the detailed list of features and options are also stored as a line note. The reason we do that is because if this is a purchase to order item, then I can actually have a configured purchase to order template item set up in Insight that can reference, for example, if I make this article number a criteria property, I can have a part number that gets created that references my supplier's part number. And I can pull these notes into my purchase order report and give them a full definition of what it is I'm ordering from that third party, so that it minimizes the amount of workload needed to properly order and fulfill these orders for these third-party items. Okay, the next item is actual labor costs, and that really the goal of that was to close a gap in existing functionality. So we had in our work order history data, we had the data fields available for storing actual costs for a couple of versions now, and this is just closing a gap to be able to calculate and record the actual labor time for manufacturing. So there's a new shop floor frame that allows scanning to record time against a specific work order operation. It requires an employee login, which has been supported for a couple of versions now in Shop Floor Assistant. You have to set up an employee organization with an ID for the employee. They scan in, and then they can log time against a work order using just the checkpoint configuration. I actual duration is recorded and calculated and summarized, so they can actually pause the recording and restart it. So if they go to a break, they can pause and they can come back and add more time later. And any time recorded against that operation will get updated and stored in the work order history. That does require the enable work order operations setting to be turned on, but then we can store that actual labor cost with the work order history, which can then be used in reports or views or charts or exports to external systems. So again, what that frame looks like is it's a new frame called time tracking. I start out by scanning my login, and then and this actually it shows what user the currently Windows user, but it actually records the employee ID. Again, I can pause and restart, and I complete the operation from within that frame, and I can either scan a barcode or select, if I have the work order work list frame in there, I can launch it from there. And that data, that actual time data will be recorded. You can see it in the work order inquiry, but it's recorded in the work order operations data, and again accumulated so that if multiple people work on the same operation, or we also support employee group definition, so I can define a group of employees, assign employees to that group, scan as a group, and then the total time for all the people involved will be recorded against the actual cost data, actual time and actual cost, based on the rates on the work center or operation costing data setup. Okay, last but not least is the conditional overrides for MCF settings. So those of you who deal with GenPost will be probably interested in this. The goal of this feature is to simplify data setup related to routing operations and machine configuration files. So if you use the machine configuration, you'll note that if I have options in the MCF file to turn features on and off. So, for example, I can on a wiki, for example, if I look at the MCF and edit that MCF, we have, for example, drilling options. I can turn on and turn off drilling on it within a given machine configuration. Well, today, if I want to run the same machine but with different settings, I have to have two separate operations available and choose the appropriate operation or the appropriate routing in order for that machine configuration to apply. Which means if I use the same machine in a lot of different ways with a lot of different options turned on and off, I need a lot of operations and a lot of MCF files. If I make a change to something that's global to all the MCFs, then I have to update all those MCFs and make sure I keep everything in sync. So what this new change does is it allows you to control these values with an override so that I can hopefully reduce the number of operations that I need to achieve this flexible end result. So for basically drill options, routing and sawing options, I can define an override in the machining rules form. Let me actually switch to a different environment here. I had the right one in the first place. So in machining rules, I can define what we call an MCF override rule. Okay, that override rule contains the override value. So the MCF in the operation is still applied, and it's the default. So whatever's turned on and off in that form are the default behavior for that operation. But for a given part family, I can define override values. So normally, for example, bottom drilling is turned on, but for this rule, I want to turn it off. And I can add any number of overrides, and the list of overridable settings is listed in here. Okay, so I can whatever do just make value changes as appropriate for these different controls. Then I can have any number of those override rules, and in item families, I can apply those rules through the Machining Rules tab. So for a given item family, I can select one or more overrides, and I can also make those overrides even within the family conditional. So I can say, okay, use this override for this operation, and by the way, make it conditional, and I just don't have any properties set up here, but so I can say, for example, make this conditional on narrow parts. So if I want to, for example, say for narrow rails that or items that I normally groove on the edge bander, I don't groove them on the edge bander if they're too small. So I need to turn on grooving at the point-to-point if this condition is met. Right? So that I can say, okay, if my whatever finished width is less than 50 millimeters or whatever, then apply this rule which has the override turn on grooving when I normally leave it off. And I can have bunches of overrides, bunches of conditions on bunches of item families as needed, so that it sort of moves that decision making out of the operation in the routing and into the actual item family definition. So the goal there again is to try to make that just reduce the overall maintenance burden when we're dealing with machine configurations and exceptions to the typical scenario. Okay, so I explained that, explain that, explain that. Again, it's all built into the forms. You use machining rules and item families to set those overrides up. And again, hopefully that allows you to have maybe fewer operations to maintain in the future. Okay, so I'll circle back to questions here in just a second. Just from a technical standpoint, Insight 9 does require SQL Server 2012, Service Pack 1, and at least mandatory hotfix 11.03.128. If you apply the latest service pack, you'll probably be fine. I believe this is a fairly old one, so you should be okay. It is compatible with SQL Server 2014, so if you're looking at a server version upgrade and you're on 8, I would skip to 14. There's no real value in going to 12 first. You can see the Windows Server version supported there. Essentially, it does support the latest server versions for things like in response. EMOS version supported R10 SR2 and 11 SR1 if you use EMOS. 2020 design version 9, 10.1, 10.3, and the latest 10.5. Design server 10 and newer. And if you, again, we don't have any customers in the U.S. using or North America using Fusion, but these are the listed Fusion versions and newer as the new service packs come out. Okay, so questions. There's a chat window. There's also a Q&A window. So if you just want to keep it simple and clean from an audio standpoint, I'll just read back the questions that are posted. I have another question related to which functionality is in separately licensed modules. That is, and I'll show you that again for reference. There are 3 new licensed priced modules: the warehouse management system, this pCon configurator integration, and the time tracking shop floor frame. The time tracking frame is a typical frame price point, so it's a one-time license. You don't have to license it for each user. It's just a system-wide license. Any other questions from the group? Do feel free, if you'd like a more detailed Q&A session or a demo for something specific, we'll be happy to arrange that for you. So you can contact support, you can contact me directly, you can contact your sales rep, your project manager, whoever you're used to working with, and we'll be happy to set up a version 9 review. That's all I have, so thanks again for your attention, and have a great afternoon.